always starts the same way. I open my eyes. The room is dark, not pitch black, just heavy. You know that feeling when you wake up and you're not sure if you're still dreaming? That's how I feel every single day. I look at the ceiling. There's a crack in the plaster. It looks like a distorted face. I've stared at it for hours. The world outside is moving. People are going to jobs they hate, to buy things they don't need. But in here, time is completely still. I sit up. My bones ache, not from physical labor, from the weight of the quiet. I walk to the sink. The floorboards creak. It's the loudest sound in the world right now. I turn on the faucet. The water is freezing. I splash it on my face. I look in the mirror. People say the eyes are the windows to the soul. If that's true, my house is empty. I don't recognize the person looking back at me anymore. The face is mine. The hair is mine. But the expression, it belongs to a stranger. Someone who knows a terrible secret but refuses to tell me. I lean in closer. For a split second, I swear my reflection blinks slightly after I do. Just a fraction of a second late. I tell myself I'm just tired. That's what sane people do. They rationalize. I sit at my desk. This is where my life is. Staring at a screen, waiting for something to happen. Society tells us to grind, to hustle. They sell us the illusion that if we just stare at these screens long enough, we'll be free. It's a lie. We're not building empires. We're building our own digital cages. My inbox is full of demands from people I've never met. I start typing, but then I notice it. My shadow on the wall. The desk lamp is on my left. My shadow should be cast to the right, and it is, but it's too tall. The proportions are wrong. The neck is too long. The shoulders are hunched too high. I stop typing. I don't move. If I don't move, it can't hurt me. That's the childish logic my brain defaults to. I slowly turn my head to the right. The shadow mimics my movement, but it's sluggish, like it's moving underwater. I need to get out of this room. I stand up. The chair squeaks. I walk toward the door leading to the hallway. The hallway is long, longer than I remember. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickers. Buzz, click, buzz. It smells like old dust and something metallic, like copper, like blood. I start walking. Every step feels heavy, like I'm dragging weights chained to my ankles. There are no doors in this hallway anymore. I swear there used to be doors. My neighbor's apartment, the stairwell, they're gone. Just smooth, dirty wallpaper stretching into the dark. Have I gone crazy? Is this what a mental breakdown feels like? Quiet and suffocating. I stop. The scratching stops. I take a step. It's not in the walls. It's coming from behind me. I can't turn around. My brain is screaming at my body to run, but my muscles are paralyzed. You always watch horror movies and yell at the screen, "Don't look behind you." But you don't understand the physical compulsion. The absolute terror of the unknown is worse than the reality of the monster. You have to look. I slowly rotate my body. The hallway behind me is empty, just the flickering bulb and the dust motes dancing in the weak light. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I close my eyes and rub my temples. You're just tired, I whisper to myself. You're just so incredibly tired. I open my eyes. It's standing right in front of me. Not down the hall, not in the shadows, inches from my face. It looks exactly like me. The same clothes, the same slouched posture. But the eyes are wrong. They aren't just pale, they are completely hollow, like deep, empty craters. It doesn't breathe, it doesn't blink, it's just staring into me, dissecting me without a scalpel. It smells like ozone and burnt air. I want to scream, but my throat is sealed shut. It slowly raises a hand. The fingers are impossibly long. They look like pale spiders. It points a single bony finger directly at my chest, at my heart, and then it speaks. Its mouth doesn't move, but the voice echoes inside my skull. You have been dead for years, it whispers. You died the day you stopped living for yourself. You died the day you traded your soul for comfort. I am not a monster. I am what's left of you. The figure slowly steps forward, stepping into my space, merging with me. It's cold, so cold. I close my eyes. I don't fight it. Why would I? It's telling the truth. There are no ghosts in this world, no demons hiding under the bed. The only real horror is the realization that you've wasted your life, that you are just a shell, walking through a world of other empty shells. I open my eyes. The hallway is gone. I am sitting on the edge of my messy bed. The room is dark, not pitch black, just heavy. I look at the ceiling. There's a crack in the plaster. It looks like a distorted face. I've stared at it for hours. It always starts the same way, and it never ends. I couldn't stay on the bed. If I stayed on the bed, the loop would win. The shadow on the wall was waiting for me to lie down. I didn't look at it. I just walked to the front door. My hand hovered over the brass knob. It was freezing. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. But what if doing the same thing is the only choice you have? What if the door is just another wall? I turned the knob. It squealed, a sharp metallic sound that hurt my teeth. I stepped out into the night. The street was entirely empty. Not a single car, not a stray dog. The orange glow of the street lamps looked diseased, like a fever. I walked without a destination. I just needed to put distance between myself and that room. But the air outside felt exactly the same as the air inside. Stagnant, dead. I looked up at the streetlight above me. Moths were violently slamming their bodies against the hot glass, over and over, burning themselves alive just to get closer to a fake light. I understood them perfectly. I stopped at an intersection. The crosswalk sign was blinking a bright, bloody red hand. Don't walk. There were no cars, but I obeyed, because that's what we are trained to do. We obey the glowing signs. We obey the rules of a society that doesn't even notice when we disappear. While I waited for the light to change, I heard a sound, not the wind. Footsteps, a dozen of them, dragging, scuffing against the pavement, right next to me. But when I looked left and right, I was entirely alone. I needed to see another human being. I needed proof that the world hadn't ended while I was staring at the ceiling. Up ahead, a 24-hour convenience store cut through the dark like a glowing, infected wound. I walked in. The fluorescent lights were violently bright. They made my eyes water. The aisles were perfectly stocked, symmetrical rows of colorful poison disguised as food. I walked down the middle aisle. The silence in here was different. It was artificial. It was waiting. I grabbed a bottle of water. I didn't want it, but I needed an excuse to approach the counter.
The cashier was standing there. His back was to me. He was wearing a red vest. "Excuse me," I said. My voice sounded weak, like dry leaves crushing together. He didn't move. He didn't turn around. He was just staring at the blank wall behind the cigarette display. I placed the bottle on the counter. It made a loud plastic thud. "Hey," I said, a little louder. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he began to turn his head. His face came into view. I stopped breathing. He didn't have the hollow eyes from my apartment. He didn't look like a monster. It was worse. He looked exactly like me. Not a shadow, not an entity. It was my face, my tired, pale eyes, my slight slouch. He looked at me with zero recognition, like I was a ghost. He slowly reached out, scanned the water bottle, and bagged it. He never broke eye contact. "Have a good night," he said, in a voice that was perfectly hollow. I left the water on the counter and backed away. I didn't walk, I ran. The streetlights blurred together into a long, sickly yellow streak. I wasn't running from the store, I was running from the realization. If he was me, then who am I? I found myself standing in front of the old community hospital. I didn't choose to come here. My legs just brought me. Hospitals are where people go to get fixed, to be saved. But the windows were dark. The large red emergency sign was flickering. E-M-E-R. The rest of the letters were burnt out. I stepped inside. The waiting room was a sea of plastic chairs, all empty. Magazines from 5 years ago were scattered on the tables. The air smelled strongly of antiseptic and decay. I walked to the reception desk. Behind the glass there was a woman sitting at a computer. I knocked on the glass. She turned her head. I already knew what I was going to see. My heart sank like a stone in a dark well. My face, my eyes, staring back at me from a woman's body. I stumbled backward. I turned and pushed through the double doors into the patient wing. I had to find someone, anyone, a doctor, a patient, a real person. I looked into room 101. A patient lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling. My face. Room 102. A nurse adjusting an IV drip. My face. Room 103, room 104, every single person in this God-forsaken building, the same dead, pale eyes, the same hollow expression. I collapsed at the end of the hallway. My knees hit the cold linoleum. I finally understood the static, the hume in my apartment, the silence on the street. We aren't individuals anymore. We've all consumed the same media, worried about the same bills, stared at the same screens for so long that our souls have homogenized into one gray, terrified mass. I am the cashier. I am the nurse. I am the shadow on the wall. There is no one left to save me, because there is no me left to save. I closed my eyes and listened to the static in my head. It sounded like a lullaby. I opened my eyes. The linoleum floor of the hospital was gone. I was staring at the ceiling. There was a crack in the plaster. It looked like a distorted face. I was back in my bed. The room was dark, not pitch black, just heavy. My clothes were damp with cold sweat. I sat up slowly. My bones ached. Was it a dream, all of it? The street, the cashier, the hospital? I wanted to believe it was a nightmare, a hallucination born from stress and isolation. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and felt the floorboards, cold, solid, real. I reached for the glass of water on my nightstand. My hand brushed against something else, something crinkly, plastic. I picked it up and held it near the dim light of the desk lamp. It was a bottle of water, the exact same brand I had left on the counter of the 24-hour store. It was sweating, still cold from the refrigerator unit. I didn't bring this home. I ran from that store. I woke up here, but the bottle was here, which meant I hadn't just dreamed the other people with my face. They were real, and they were bringing things back with them.
I froze. Nobody comes to my apartment, especially at this hour. I didn't even know what hour it was. The digital clock next to my bed was blank. I didn't move. My heart was beating so hard, it felt like it was going to crack my ribs. I stared at the closed door leading to the hallway. Go away, I thought, hoping the silence would absorb the words. Someone had a key. I don't have a roommate. I've never given a spare key to anyone. The heavy front door creaked open. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. The footsteps were moving through the living room, stopping, then moving towards the hallway leading to my bedroom. They sounded exactly like my own footsteps. The same weight, the same drag. A figure stepped into the doorway. It was silhouetted by the faint ambient light from the street outside. It was wearing a plain, dark, long-sleeved shirt, dark pants. It slouched slightly. It raised its head, and the dim, warm light from my desk lamp caught its face. It was me. Not a reflection, not a shadow, another me. He didn't attack me. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted, just like I was. He looked at the bed. Then he looked at the computer desk. Finally, he looked directly at me. His pale, hollow eyes met mine. He pointed a long, pale finger toward the front door, the door he had left wide open. I understood. It was my turn to be the cashier, my turn to be the patient, my turn to wander the empty streets, and it was his turn to sit at the desk, to stare at the crack in the ceiling, to slowly forget who he was in the safety of this room. There was no escape. There was only a rotation of roles in a play with no audience. I looked at the open door leading out into the dark hallway. Then I looked back at the bed. I could fight him for it. I could scream, but I didn't. I was too tired to fight myself. I picked up the plastic water bottle. I walked past the version of me standing in the doorway. He didn't move. He just watched me go. I stepped out into the cold, empty hallway. The heavy door clicked shut behind me. It always starts the same. I open my eyes. The room is bright, too bright. The aisles are perfectly stocked, symmetrical rows of colorful poison. I stand behind the counter. I wait for the door to open. I wait for someone to look at me and finally realize that they are already dead. He just stood there, holding the box, looking at me. His face was my face, but the expression was entirely dead. Then he slowly reached into the box. He pulled out the dark gray stone lens. The red light inside it pulsed like a dying star. He didn't put it to his eye. He pointed it directly at me. The red light hit my face. It didn't feel like light. It felt like cold water soaking into my brain. The room started to stretch. The walls pulled away from me, getting taller, darker. The peeling wallpaper began to writhe again, but this time I wasn't looking through the lens. The lens had brought the nightmare into the real world. I stumbled backward, blindly feeling for the doorknob. I threw myself into the hallway and slammed the door shut. My apartment building hallway is usually a straight line, 3 doors down, then the elevator. But when I looked left, the hallway was gone. It had been replaced by a concrete stairwell, spiraling violently downward into pitch black. There was no elevator. There were no other doors, just the stairs and the smell of ozone and wet earth. I didn't have a choice. I started walking down. The stairs were uneven, some were too wide, some were barely an inch deep, like they were built by something that didn't understand how human legs worked. I counted the floors, 10, 20, 30. The warm, dim light bulbs hanging from the ceiling were getting weaker. The air was getting colder, and the silence was getting heavier. At floor 50, the stairs finally ended. A massive, heavy steel door stood in front of me. It was rusted shut, covered in deep, violent scratches. The sound was coming behind the door. It sounded like hundreds of people, maybe thousands. I pressed my ear against the cold steel. I couldn't make out the words, just a desperate rhythmic chanting. I didn't turn the handle. The heavy steel door simply clicked open on its own. It swung inward, dragging against the concrete floor with a sickening scrape. The air that rushed out smelled like ancient dust and old film strips. The darkness inside was absolute. It was a void waiting to be filled. I took a deep breath and stepped through. The lights flickered on, one by one. It was a theater, not a movie theater, a massive, grand opera house, but it was decaying. The red velvet seats were rotting, the gold trim was tarnished black, and it wasn't empty. Every single seat was filled, thousands of figures sitting perfectly still. I walked slowly down the center aisle. My footsteps were swallowed by the velvet carpet. I looked at the audience. They were mannequins, pale, smooth, featureless mannequins, dressed in plain, dark, long-sleeve shirts, dark pants. They weren't moving, but they were breathing. Their chests rose and fell in perfect, terrifying unison, waiting for the show to begin. I froze. Every single mannequin in the theater turned its head to look at me. The featureless plastic faces began to melt, to shift. Lines drew themselves onto the blanked canvases. Small, neutral mouths, slightly messy dark hair, large, round, pale eyes. Thousands of my own faces, staring down from me from the balconies. Thousands of tired, anxious eyes. They had been waiting for me to take the stage. I couldn't breathe. The weight of their stares was crushing me. Then a light cut through the darkness from the projector booth behind me. It hit the massive torn screen at the front of the stage, but it wasn't white light. It was a deep, pulsing red, the same red from the stone lens, and on the screen a countdown began. The show was starting, and I was the only one not in my seat. 0. The red light vanished. The massive screen at the front of the theater flickered into life. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a monster. It was a feed, a grainy black and white security camera feed. I looked at the screen. It was my bedroom, my desk, my bed, and there I was, sitting on the edge of the mattress, staring blankly at the wall. The footage sped up. It showed me waking up, going to the sink, staring in the mirror, sitting at the desk, typing, lying back down in the dark. Over and over, day after day. There was no dialogue, no soundtrack, just the agonizing, repetitive documentation of a life where absolutely nothing happens. The architecture of a wasted existence. I heard a noise behind me. I slowly turned away from the screen. The audience, the thousands of identical copies of me, they were clapping. They were moving their hands together, slowly, silently, perfectly synchronized. But they weren't smiling. Their pale eyes were wide, their small mouths were pulled into identical, rigid grimaces of pure terror. They were applauding the tragedy of my life. The clapping stopped. Every single head turned slowly to look at the front row. Right in the center of the first row, illuminated by a single warm spotlight, there was an empty seat. It was waiting. It had always been waiting. The stone lens didn't show me a different dimension. It just showed me where I was eventually going to end up. I couldn't run. Where would I go? Back up the stairs? Back to the apartment? Back to the desk? It was the same cage, just a different size. My legs moved on their own. Gravity felt heavier here, the weight of thousands of empty eyes pulling me downward. I walked toward the front row. The figures on either side didn't move, but I could feel the cold radiating off their dark clothes. I reached the seat. I turned around to face the massive screen. It was still playing. Me, sitting at the desk, staring at nothing. I sat down. The red velvet was cold, and it smelled like dust. I placed my hands on my lap. I tried to look away from the screen, but my neck wouldn't turn. My spine locked into place, rigid, perfect. I could feel the thoughts draining out of my head, the panic, the fear, the sadness. It was all slowly leaking out, replaced by a cold, heavy numbness. I watched myself on the screen. I watched myself waste another hour, another day, another year. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. My chest rose and fell, exactly in time with the thousands of others. We were one organism now, one massive monument to forgotten potential. I am not the audience. I am the monument. Then the projector stopped. The screen went dark, and the warm, dim orange glow of my desk lamp turned back on. Tuesday morning, another Tuesday. I sit at this desk. I wait, but I know the truth now. I'm not waiting for anything to happen. I'm just waiting for the show.